Good afternoon. I will call to order the March 28th meeting of the Minneapolis City Planning Commission. My name is Matt Brown. I serve as president of the commission. I'm joined today by Commissioners Kronzer, Magrino, Slack, Sweezy, Lukey-Pier, and Rockwell. Our first item of business is to approve the actions from the March 14th meeting. May I have a motion to approve those actions? Second. We have a motion and a second. All in favor? And that motion carries. Our next item of business is to organize the agenda. We'll determine which items will be on consent and which will be discussed. You can find hard copies of the agenda in the hallway. So starting at the top, the first item on our agenda is item 1, a new Star Taxi at 400 East Lake Street. That's a conditional use permit for a taxi service there. Is anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on that item? Seeing no one, we will put that on consent. Item 2 is the Ken and Norm's Cooler extension at 4801 Chicago Avenue. It's a conditional use permit and variance for a building addition there. We'll discuss that item. Item 3 is the 2008 Bryant Avenue Apartments at 2008 Bryant Avenue South. That is a site plan review for a new multifamily building. Is anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on that item? Seeing no one, we will put that on consent. And finally, item 4 is the Harriet Avenue Apartments at 2903, 2905, 2907, and 2911 Harriet Avenue South, and 2900, 2904, 2910, and 2912 Grand Avenue. Several applications for a new multifamily building there. Is anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on that item? We have one person, so we will discuss item 4. All right, a couple more. So our agenda as amended is items 1 and 3 will be on consent. Items 2 and 4 will be discussed. May I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended? We have a motion and a second. All in favor? And that motion carries. Our next item of business is the Committee of the Whole consent agenda. And Vice President Slack, do you have an update from our March 17th meeting?
Yeah. Thank you, President Brown. At the March 17, 2016 Committee of the Whole, we had one item that we heard. It was a land sale for 2953 Pierce Street Northeast. And the recommended motion is to approve the staff report that the item is consistent with the Minneapolis Plan for Sustainable Growth.
All right. And I'll take that as a motion to find that that land sale is consistent with the comprehensive plan. Is there a second? Second. We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. And that motion carries. Next, we'll move on to the public hearing portion of our meeting. And first, we will open the public hearing for the items on the consent agenda. That's items 1 and 3. Is there anyone wishing to speak on items 1 or 3? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. And may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. And that motion carries. We'll move on now to our items for discussion. We'll start with item 2. The Ken and Norm's Cooler extension at 4801 Chicago Avenue. And Shanna is staff.
Thank you, President Brown, Commissioners. If it's all right with all of you, the applicant has requested just to discuss the conditions of approval. Staff was able to make findings to support the conditional use permit and requested variances for the addition. So if we could, if that, okay, great. The applicant's proposed site plan shows a modification of the parking currently in their angled stalls. You'll see there's 2 curb cuts, one on Chicago, and this is a typo, it's 48th Street East. And so they're proposing to do 90-degree stalls towards the facing east on the property. Staff has recommended that the applicant provide a screen wall, preferably a solid wall along the property line, because as proposed, we have concerns that vehicles are backing out onto the public right-of-way and into the public sidewalk as they're pulling in and then maneuvering to exit out. This is about 13 feet, 8 inches behind the stall where 22 feet is normally required. It is an improvement from what's there right now. It's about 9 or 10 feet. Staff has offered this proposed alternative site plan that shows a 22-foot drive aisle behind the stalls and essentially kind of creates two separate parking areas where one could access parking of either the handicap accessible stall or the standard stall. There would be an opening in the wall to allow for a pedestrian connection and walkway safe passage into the building entrance, which is here, or coming in from East 48th Street, a compact stall here, or one of 3 standard stalls there. With that, I can take any questions.
All right. Are there any questions of staff? The public hearing isn't open yet, but you'll have an opportunity to speak. Just a moment. Shanna, I have a question. Initially, the applicant was proposing a fence as opposed to a wall.
Mm-hmm.
Could you elaborate on your thoughts for requiring a masonry wall as opposed to a fence? Is it mostly related to the durability?
That's absolutely correct. Staff is concerned that if we provide just a 3-foot wall, or I'm sorry, 3-foot fence here or 4-foot ornamental fence, that they'll sustain damage to it if vehicles do hit it. If it's masonry, the chances of allowing for durable use for a longer period of time increase. So that's where staff's recommendation is coming from for a wall. The applicant has done some research, and I will let him speak to that a little bit further. But you'll see originally it looks as though there were bollards in that area, and those were removed by the previous property owner about 9 years ago. And it was really because folks were having damage done to their vehicles, and they worked through the council member's office at the time to have them removed. But again, I'll let him go into more detail related to that. But in my conversations, even with the applicant, I wasn't certain that they even wanted to pursue any sort of fence or screen wall or screen fence in that location at this point, even though it was shown on their site plan.
Okay. And Shanna, I have one other question. If they ended up reducing the amount of parking, does that present an issue with compliance with what the code requires there? Do they need to preserve the number of parking spaces they have?
Their minimum off-street parking requirement is 4 spaces, so we have quite a bit of flexibility to redesign the parking lot to allow for safe passage of vehicles and pedestrian access. So what we attempted to show with this plan is the same quantity of stalls as they were proposing for themselves, so it's not a loss in the quantity of parking. In fact, I think we were able to convert one of their compact stalls to standard with this proposed layout.
Any other questions of staff? Commissioner Rockwell.
So just trying to sort of understand a little bit of the pushback in the commentary letters.
Yes.
It seemed like, well, I guess, could you sort of speak to your conversations with neighbors who don't want to see a wall there? It seemed like maybe part of it was that the parking lot gets used for events. There was a bike race that was mentioned, or what are the concerns?
One of the points of contention that I understood from the neighbors was related to this landscaped yard here in front of Sovereign Grounds and reducing the visibility of that use. Sovereign Grounds recently did a significant facade improvement and has new signage, and I think there was concern about blocking the view of that entrance. And then to the applicant's concerns, kind of splitting off the parking would make it appear as though this parking may be devoted to the adjacent use for which all of the parking here is for Ken and Norm's, the subject property. I didn't really have extensive conversations with the neighborhood other than to understand that they preferred to put the landscaping in the public right-of-way instead of on the property, although that's we have very limited jurisdiction in that realm. When we have a conditional use permit application, but no site plan review, there's the subject property is subject to landscaping and screening requirements. So you're not seeing the full requirements for the 20% landscaping, the quantity of canopy trees, but we try our best to take a site that has the potential for improvement and make suggestions or recommendations to the Planning Commission where we think we would be able to get the most bang for our buck, really.
Commissioner Lupke Peter.
Shanna, I just wanted to know, did the applicant submit any plans that just show it complying with typical parking dimensions and having just the required parking and not exceeding that number?
No, this is their proposed plan, and I can pull out the existing condition, which is actually far worse than what we see here. And they have non-conforming rates to the drive aisle minimum.
Mm-hmm.
Staff at one point had considered, would be able to have a better site plan if we closed a curb cut. We didn't really think that was possible. In conversations with the applicant, our understanding is that folks will come in through the Chicago Avenue curb cut, park, and then they'll exit off of East 48th Street, and this is a controlled intersection here. So this is the existing parking layout, and I'm trying to read my notation here. Just under 9.5 feet is what they currently have to the property line.
And that's they have grandfather rights to that aisle width?
This was originally constructed as service station, so it certainly has never met the requirements that we would have had either as a service station or as a retail use that we have today.
Does it retain grandfather rights, so changing from diagonal or angled parking to perpendicular? Because I know that recommended drive aisle width change with that change, so I question whether that would still hold.
It does, but it's been increased. So we're seeing just under 9.5 feet at the angle stall, and now we're up to 13.8.
Mm-hmm. And do they have an answer for how a car is supposed to get in there without traversing the parking or the sidewalk?
They think that they certainly have not made the contention that that will not occur. In fact, they're concerned that by requiring the wall, it won't give enough people to back out. And then certainly that means that folks are driving on the public right of way.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Slack.
Yeah, Shanna, has Public Works reviewed the plan and provided any feedback?
This plan did not meet the requirements to be reviewed through the preliminary development review, just because of the size of the addition, and really it's only an improvement for the pervious surface by allowing these two new landscaped yards. So they have not commented on the proposed layout or design.
I don't have any real concerns over whether it's a fence or a solid wall. I think it's just defining that edge better. What I do have some concerns over is it appears like, especially right at the intersection at the radius, it's really tight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I can only imagine where the ped ramps might be.
Yes.
I'm guessing that either there's two on either end of the radius or there's one in the middle. If there's one in the middle, there's probably not an accessible route through that section there. Whereas based on the plan that you first showed, the staff recommendation for putting in a fence or a wall or something there is an opportunity to maybe shift that a little bit to accommodate more space passage through there. It's just something to consider.
Are there any further questions of staff? If there are none, I can open the public hearing at this time. I'd like to ask the applicant to speak first, if you are here. And please state your name and address for the record, and if you don't mind, address the issues related to the parking lot.
Okay, I'm Alexander Bocharnikov. I was working on design of this project.
And if you don't mind, you can stand at the center microphone if you'd like.
Okay,
something
with the owner, and owner is right here sitting behind us. And basically the main issue with the design that was provided by the city is if we're gonna build a wall, there is no radius to turn for the cars. There is easy access to the parking, but there is really no way to exit from the parking. If you think about people backing up into a green zone that was designed by the city or into the building itself, it creates a lot of issues. And then by doing that parking, driving bike path right in the middle, that means whoever gets in from Chicago Avenue, they are not going to be able to exit on 48. So at the, at the peak times at 5 o'clock on a Friday especially, there's going to be a lot of traffic in there, and people, whoever, trying to enter into the parking, they are not going to be able to exit on the road, back on the road, because, road is going to be always blocked by other cars because of the red light. So our option was to, have two exits, like at the gas stations, usually at the corner. So whoever enters on 48, they can easily get out on Chicago and just continue following their road. By, doing this kind of design, we are just going to block everybody on one side of the parking lot. And the second issue with this parking design is that half of the parking is goes to other, goes to other business, and whoever gonna drive into a parking, they're gonna assume this parking belongs to a business that there's a coffee shop right next to it. So basically, people who go into coffee shop, they just gonna park there and sit in a coffee shop, and whoever wants to shop at Ken and Norms, they're not gonna be able to do so. With our design, there is a few flaws also, but our design is basically been proven with time, because whatever we're trying to do is pretty much almost the same design as it is there right now. We're just moving a few parkings a little bit farther from where they are right now. That's all what we're doing. We are keeping the same amount of parking spots. We are not changing almost anything. We're just increasing building space a little bit, but the number of parking stays the same. The way of exit and entrance stays the same. So basically, we know it works because it was there for many years, and there was some issues in the past with those pillars that was caught 9 years ago, that was shown by Shannon. And previous city council, I believe, or city council member, Scott Benson, approved to cut those off because there wasn't a way of the either cars or people, because a lot of people been complaining. So, and it was done 9 years ago. So we don't want to create the same issue again by building a wall.
All right. Are there any questions of the applicant? Commissioner Lukey here.
Yeah, hi. So I had a question actually related to the plan that you did submit. Without, and thanks, Shannon, if you could put that up. I understand your hesitation with a wall, but understanding that it's my understanding that driving on the sidewalk is illegal, how would you anticipate cars getting out of this parking configuration without driving on the sidewalk? Have you done any sort of turning radius studies? Because it seems to me as though they're not going to fit, especially given the width of the spaces.
Well, minimum is 22 feet. We don't have that. We have only 13 feet from the parking itself to the fence.
Exactly my concern. So how do you anticipate them not crossing the line onto the sidewalk?
One of the options that we can do is we can rotate this parking and do like a 60 parking degree. That's going to solve this issue in half, but then it's going to create this, another issue that is going to be only one-way parking. Second thing, there is already parking there, and it works. I mean, there's parking lots there right now, and people parking there on an everyday basis. So I assume people backing into the sidewalk, but I think that's the main reason is that those pillars been cut, because this property is, was designed a long time ago, and nobody expected that so many cars going to be parking there on an everyday basis. But the way it is right now, it works, and we are trying to just follow the design that was done in the past.
So then I have two questions. Do you know when that previous design was actually first done? Is it aged to the building era, or I'm just curious there?
I'm not sure. I know.
It's not that critical. My second question is when looking at the plan that the city suggested, I hear your concerns about how would it be perceived that the one parking lot's for one business and one's for the other, but I'm wondering if you have contemplated reducing your number of parking to achieve a better layout that would allow people to drive through, not hit the wall or fence or whatever obstruction it is, such as if that middle set of three, I'm just going to throw this out there, 3 parking spaces were removed entirely, and you could include part of the sidewalk that's up against the building in the actual walkway for the handicap space, and then perhaps convert the front two into compact spaces. That way a car could literally drive right through without having to back into anything except from those two compact, which would give them actually swing space to turn and back out without backing into the traffic or a sidewalk. I mean, is that something your client would entertain as a means of actually solving the problem for this site? And then it would all be sized actually appropriately to code?
Well, I think we need to review that.
Oh, sure.
And need to spend some time on reviewing that, and maybe just to go on a parking lot again and just do a preliminary drawings right on the side and see if it's going to work or not.
Thanks.
Commissioner Kronzer.
Yeah, I just had another question kind of related to Commissioner Lukie-Pierce. With the 60-degree angle parking, do you know how wide that drive aisle would be behind it?
Well, it's definitely going to be more than 13 that is right now, but it's probably going to increase to 18 feet or so.
Okay, are there any other questions of the applicant? If there are none, we can move on to some other speakers. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this item? Yes, please come to the microphone and state your name and address for the record.
Chris Reynolds, one of the owners of Sovereign Grounds, which is right next to Ken and Norm's. So I have lots of concerns. You can't build a wall there. People are going to end up going through the glass in my coffee shop is what's going to happen. And the liquor store has deliveries of semi-trucks, how they are going to get in and out safely on Chicago Avenue without causing a lot of dangerous problems. And half of our customers are under 3 years old. And if you think it's dangerous now, it will be much more dangerous to try and do curves, turning around, all this kind of stuff. I am not in favor of a wall. There's a big, giant plate glass window on our business, and I can just see somebody going right through that if they're, trying to avoid that cement. It's very dangerous.
Okay. Commissioner Lukie-Pierce, you have a question?
Yeah,
for
I'm
the
wondering if you
speaker?
could point to the plan. I'm confused as to how the wall on the other side would impact your business.
Because
Because it's,
have you seen semi trucks? They're big. You put a wall there, the semi truck is going to overcorrect and it's going to go right into my building. I guarantee it.
okay, so
And
they,
reduce. That takes up all the space it is now the way it is. I mean, it works. They're used to it and everything, but you start putting walls up there or green space or anything else, and the truck drivers will overcorrect.
and these are for deliveries to the
Liquor
Ken and-
store.
Okay,
Yeah.
and so have you talked with owners about perhaps arranging different sized trucks to be making deliveries? Because we've done it before in Uptown with grocery stores and whatnot. I don't know if you've had those discussions, so I thought I'd ask.
It's not my business, but it's not a very big spot to begin with, and I just can't see reducing it by any.
Thanks.
Like I said, this parking lot, the cars pull up, here's my window, here's the car, it's as close as it can be already. I don't want to have any accidents. So,
All right. Are there any other questions? If there are none, is there anyone else who would like to speak on this item? Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. And commissioners, we have two applications before us, conditional use permit and a variance. Are there any further questions, or would someone like to start the discussion off with a motion? Commissioner Lukie-Pierce.
Well, I don't have a motion yet, but I did want to discuss application for the conditional use permit. Subpoint number 2, where it requires a minimum of 3-foot masonry wall. Here's my thoughts. I'm not sure I'm all gung-ho on a wall per se. I just kind of actually have septic concerns more than delivery concerns, which can be negotiated and aren't forever, and parking lot design, which seems to be a little bit lacking. So I'm not sure a wall's the answer. I do think there is something, though. I mean, we have an obligation to protect the public, and and our standards are that sidewalks are for people. They're not for even supposedly bicycles. So why we would kind of look the other way when it's clear that automotive vehicles would be used on a pedestrian sidewalk, especially if there's people as young as the age of 3 who are frequently coming here. That's a concern to me, and I don't want to set this precedent that that's acceptable in our city, because it's not. I'm not sure wall's the answer. I do, however, think that perhaps the applicant needs to go back and look at a different parking configuration, because I think maybe they just kind of can't have their cake and eat it too. You can't keep the same quantity of spaces, have this addition, and then expect it to work, given that we don't drive Model Ts anymore. I mean, our cars are bigger, and people seem to be anecdotally worse drivers. So I would say maybe the wall's not the answer, so I'm actually fine not having there, but something needs to be there. You can't just leave it barren. And normally we would require a landscaping buffer, so on one hand, it's almost like, I feel like it's a little bit of a grace that's been extended already. I think that most parking lots, we require greenery and we require trees, and not requiring a tree here perhaps is okay, because we don't want to block signage to the coffee shop, but at the same time, we do need greenery. It's just, we live in a day and age when we can't neglect that anymore. So I am in favor of reconsidering this at a later date if they reconfigure their parking lot. Otherwise, I'm fine voting for it now and saying they have to build the wall, because to me, it's a toss-up. I guess it's a matter of what the applicant feels their preference would be, but I don't think we should budge. And maybe that's where item number 3 comes in, where they have to provide a site plan that does the parking layout that prevents that from happening. It has to occur, in which case then we could prevent the wall. But anyway, there's my 2 cents on that one.
Okay, thank you. The public hearing is closed now, but if I don't know if anyone has further questions for the speaker. Does anyone else have any questions or comments? I'll just add, I would agree, and to clarify that condition number 3 does appear to provide a lot of flexibility with respect to how the parking lot is reconfigured. I can say I would be open to angle parking spaces, which would reduce the necessary width of the drive aisle or some other solutions. I'm certainly open to reducing the number of spaces that are on site to 4, which is what is required if that helps with the traffic flow. I would agree with Commissioner Lupeep here that some sort of screen is important to prevent people from driving on the sidewalk. Commissioner Lupeep here.
So I just wanted to propose now, since I had gotten this off my chest a little bit, I'm going to propose a motion. The one thing I would say, so I'm going to move approval of condition A with the change to subpoint 2 saying the applicant should provide a minimum of 350 square feet of landscaping and a physical barrier between the sidewalk and the parking. And direction to staff is it's a fence, it's a wall, it's something that physically prevents a vehicle from going into the public realm. And I don't care how perforated it is. If it's bollards again, so be it. And that I'll keep item 3. However, I do want to also temper that with the suggestion that perhaps there's a compromise to be reached in regards to the landscaping of the front and allowing for 2 compact stalls there to allow something else to happen. Instead, I do think they need greenery, some low shrubs, something as a buffer between the sidewalk and the parking space there as well on the 48th Street side, but I don't think it necessarily needs to be that depth, so I'll leave that to the staff discretion, but I'd be fine with it as long as it's that, if they can make it work with the way people park and drive, and we drive all the things we need today, great. And if not, then I guess we'll see it back. That's the end of my motion.
All right. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
And maybe I will, we can see if there's any further discussion, and then Commissioner Rockwell.
Just a clarification question. So I'm looking at your sheet because you have your notes on it. Right, physical barrier. So my question to you, Commissioner, is that if we've got the minimum of 350 square feet of landscaping, but if we're also giving some flexibility with the landscaping on the north side to make that potentially 2 compact spots, we just add your proposal is add the landscaping somewhere else on the lot. Okay, so maintain that. Okay. That's my question.
All right. Is there any further discussion? If there's none, I'll reread the motion. So that's a motion to approve the conditional use permit with 3 conditions. First, that as staff recommended, the conditional use permit shall be recorded with Hennepin County. The second condition is that the applicant shall provide a minimum of 350 square feet of landscaping and a minimum 3-foot high physical barrier between the sidewalk and parking lot to ensure that vehicles do not drive onto the parking lot. And then condition 3 is that the applicant shall provide a site plan with a parking layout that prevents vehicles from maneuvering onto the public sidewalk. This reconfigured parking layout may include a change to the landscaped area at the southeast corner of the site. Is that the southeast corner of the site? Am I getting my directions right? Okay. So that is the motion, and we have a second. If there is no further discussion, clerk, please call the roll.
Bender?
Aye.
Kronzer?
Aye.
Lipke-Pier?
Aye.
Magrino?
Aye.
Rockwell?
Aye.
Slack?
Aye.
Sweezy?
Aye.
So that's 7-0.
And that motion carries. And then we have a second application of variance for the addition being located more than 4 feet from the property line, an addition with 0% of the walls containing windows. Is there a motion to approve that variance? Is there? We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Sweezy?
Aye.
Slack?
Aye.
Rockwell?
Aye.
Magrino?
Aye.
Lipke-Pier?
Aye.
Kronzer?
Aye.
Bender?
Aye.
So it's 7-0.
And that motion carries. That concludes our discussion on that item. Our next item for discussion is item number 4, the Harriet Avenue Apartments, and Lisa is staff.
Good evening, Commissioners. The project before you tonight is composed of 4 separate parcels along Grand and Harriet, just south of the Midtown Greenway. The parcels that are along Harriet are currently zoned I-1, and the parcels along Grand Avenue are currently zoned R2B. The project is in the Whittier neighborhood. The applicant is proposing a 6-story, 111-unit multifamily building. They would provide 96 parking spaces within 2 levels of underground parking. The project also includes the vacation of a part of an existing alley and then dedication of a new alley extension out to Grand Avenue. There are several land use applications that are required for this proposal, including rezoning, conditional use permit, a few variances, site plan review, a preliminary plat, and vacation. So I'm just going to briefly summarize the staff analysis for each of those applications. Starting with the rezoning, the applicant is requesting to rezone all of the parcels to the R5 district. The parcels are designated urban neighborhood on the future land use map in the comp plan. The location of the proposal is indicated by the circle on the map. It's 2 blocks from Lindale, which is a designated commercial corridor. It's 1 block from the Lynn Lake Activity Center, and it's 1 block from Lake Street, which is also a commercial corridor. The existing zoning, you can see highlighted on that map. The surrounding zoning is primarily industrial currently, with residential and commercial mixed in as well. There's R5 directly kitty corner across the Midtown Greenway, and I2 across Grand, and I1 across Harriet. And then the majority of the block between Lake Street and the Midtown Greenway is zoned R2B with some R3 and commercial zoning. These sites were designated in the Midtown Greenway Land Use and Development Plan and the Lynn Lake Small Area Plan for high-density housing. And then in the Midtown Greenway rezoning study, staff had recommended that these properties, as well as many others, would be rezoned to R5. At that time, that rezoning was not adopted, but that was the recommended zoning at that time in order to implement those plans. So staff is recommending approval of the rezoning. So moving on to the conditional use permit to increase maximum height, the request is to increase from 4 stories or 56 feet to 6 stories or 74 feet. The applicant has designed the building to kind of have a terrace design. So the 5th story is stepped back 11 feet from the 4th-story portion of the building. And then the 6th story is stepped back an additional 19 feet. So those are all stepping back from the Midtown Greenway. So the shadowing, this was an attempt to minimize the shadowing impact on the Midtown Greenway. The applicant did provide detailed shadow studies of the project, which showed that the project will shadow the Greenway path for 108 days a year, so from the end of October to the beginning of February. Staff found that the height of the building was within the scale and character of the surrounding blocks. There's ranges of heights of buildings between 2 and 6 stories within just a few blocks of this property. And then the small area plan guidance, again, this site was designated for high density housing in those 2 plans. And then it also, the plans say that higher intensity uses would be closer to the activity centers. And then the further you are from the activity centers, the less intense the use. The small area plan, specifically the Midtown Greenway small area plan, really focus on minimizing shadowing impacts of the Greenway, and also placed an importance on projects providing a promenade along the Greenway. Moving on to 2 front yard variances were requested for this proposal. So the property would be a through lot, so it has 2 front yards along Grand and Harriet. So on Harriet, they're requesting from 15 feet to 4 feet for the building, and then 0 feet for the balconies. And then the image on the slide is the Grand Avenue side. And the reason we're showing that is because staff was recommending approval of both front yard variances, but the Grand Avenue side, staff was recommending a condition of approval that a proposed loading area not be included in the front yard, but approving the rest of the obstructions in the front yard. The variance of the south interior side yard. So this request is from 15 feet to 5 feet. And as you'll have read in the report, this proposed setback allows for the bulk of the building to be concentrated along the southern edge of the property and therefore away from the Midtown Greenway in order to minimize that shadowing and provide space for the promenade along the Greenway. The adjacent property that would be most directly impacted is this 2-story industrial zone commercial property. In the report, we note that there are no windows on this property except for 2 glass block windows. So the impact staff believes would be relatively minor. Also, the applicant has designed the building so that the first floor would be 9 feet from the property line. So at the pedestrian level, there would be more space between the 2 properties. Staff was recommending approval of that variance as well. There's also a variance of the loading requirement, and this one is just because the loading area that's proposed is just 8 feet 7 inches instead of the required 10 feet. And so staff is recommending approval of that because the area that they've proposed is directly north of the alley, staff is recommending, and Public Works also recommended in the preliminary development review process that there's some sort of visual separation like striping or a difference in pavement that would help to visually distinguish the loading area from the alley. So that's the recommended condition of approval. There's also a vacation and a preliminary plat that are required. So here's just showing the portion of the alley that would be vacated, and then where the new alley would be dedicated, which would be south of this project. So the alley would just be rerouted to the south of the project and out to Grand, and it currently already doglegs like that. Site plan review, the applicant is amenable to all the conditions of approval, so I can get into that if you have questions, but I'm just going to skip over that. We're recommending approval with conditions. 2 letters were received in terms of public comments, one from the Whittier Alliance, one from the Midtown Greenway Coalition. Those should be in their packets. They recommended approval with some conditions and notes in their letters. And then staff recommendation is approval of all the applications with the conditions recommended are listed in the report. And I can take any questions from there.
Right. Are there any questions of staff? If there are none, at this time I'll open the public hearing on this item. I'd like to ask the applicant to speak first very briefly. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Jason Lord from Solheim Companies. I'm at 3532 Fremont Avenue South. And I think Lisa did an excellent job summarizing the staff recommendations. So I'll just be here for any questions that you may have.
All right. Are there any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Ben.
Thank you, Mr. President. One of the, this is in my ward, so I've heard from constituents about this. One of the biggest concerns I've heard is about the pathway. So people are really excited to see the pathway along the Greenway, but wanted to make sure that it was publicly accessible. Could you talk about the status of that conversation with the gate?
Yes, absolutely. We get some great commentary and feedback and met with the Midtown Greenway Group and Whittier Alliance. So we've relocated the gates towards the patios of the units. And so the public walkway is always going to be open, and we've extended the width of the public walkway. It's 5 feet in most areas with a 2-foot rock mulch buffer and then perennials on either side and trees of the walkway. And so that's always going to be open 24/7. There aren't any gates in the walkway. It does jog similar to some of the other walkways that were built to the west, and that's mostly because of the bridge embankments and the slope and the existing retaining wall. And we have some decorative historic limestone that's lining the entries and the jogs of the walkway to create sort of a contemplative landscape experience. But we anticipate it's open 24/7, and we have lighting and bollards designed along the walkway to create a safe, welcoming space.
Commissioner Kronzer.
That promenade sidewalk, is that planned to be standard concrete?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Just a note, I was down west of here this weekend, and there's some decorative concrete sidewalks, and they just appear more private in nature. So that standard concrete, I think, is the right approach here.
All right. Are there any questions, any further questions of the applicant? If there are none, we can move on to some other speakers. And I know a few of you wanted to speak on this item, so you can decide who goes first and state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Leo Marcus Whiteford. I live at 2825 Harriet Avenue, down the street from this proposed development. I want to preface my remarks here by saying I'm not necessarily opposed to development here, but I do have some very great concerns, and I'm primarily going to suggest that the board does not approve the conditional use permit for the additional height. And I'm going to try to briefly enumerate my reasons for this. There's also a couple of concerns I have about traffic issues that I will get to, but just let me move right along here. This project is way out of scale for the neighborhood. 6 stories, a 6-story glass wall at the end of this block is just not in any way complementary to the neighborhood. Everything, as was just called, down the block is R2B. The majority of the neighborhood residentially is R2B. The R5 properties that are on the Grand Avenue side are only 3 stories. The building across the Greenway that is currently R5 was supposed to be only a 4-story building, and that's a sad story that I won't go into right now. But if this conditional use permit is granted and this development is allowed the 6 stories, that is carte blanche for other developers who are eyeing parcels along the Greenway to be able to say that, well, they got 6 stories, so why shouldn't we? And this is going to create the Grand Canyon effect, I like to call it, where we've already seen it between Lyndale and Hennepin Avenues. It's contrary to what the Greenway is supposed to be doing, and it is extremely out of proportion to what is around it in the neighborhood. The other issue is that I know density is the big mantra as far as the Greenway and stuff. I would take issue with the argument that this is near an activity center, because it's not. It's in the middle of a residential neighborhood, and I think 6 stories is just excessive. 4 stories, I can see that. That's still a little over the top. But the issue that I want to get to here is that we already have, due to development in the neighborhood that we have tried to regulate and has gotten out of control for reasons we won't go into here. We already have humongous traffic problems in the area. Grand Avenue currently is almost impassable at times. So if this development with its 111 units is granted, the one that's currently being proposed on the adjacent lot between Pleasant and Grand will probably be granted. That's 127 units. This is even more traffic on the streets that can't handle it right now. There has been no provision by the city for any kind of traffic handling. We haven't had any introduction of traffic signals or any ways to mitigate the traffic problems that we have. The concept of vacating the alley